My father-in-law is forcing my husband to break up with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. This is a 3-part story time and I'm doing a full face of pink makeup today. My husband and I have been married for 2 years. Now, we did get married very, very young. By very young, I mean I was 18 and he was 19. When we started dating in high school, his dad was totally against the relationship. See, my husband was super popular. He played on the football team. All the girls chased him. He also played basketball and was perfect at everything he did. As you can imagine, was extremely strict with him. He was not even allowed to go out on weekends. Me, on the other hand, my parents are pretty much hippies. They let me do whatever I want. We're all very spiritual. My parents have full trust in me. Because of this, I make smart decisions. I actively seek my parents' advice. I even told my parents I lost my virginity when I did. And we had a big conversation about it. It was not dramatic. It was not like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. They just support me in everything I do. Now, my husband's parents are not the same. They tell him not to do a lot of things. They try to control him. So as we were dating in high school, his dad kept telling him to break up with me. He claimed that I was holding him back and that because of me, he spent less time training, which technically, yes, is true. But at the same time, you cannot stop your son from experiencing human relationships. In fact, he actually broke up with me for 2 weeks, but then we got back together in secret. Everything culminated when he asked me to marry him right after graduation. His parents were absolutely against it, but my parents were all for it. You guessed it, go to part 2. My father-in-law wants my husband to break up with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. This is a 3-part story time and I'm doing a full face of pink makeup. When he asked me to marry him right out of high school, his parents absolutely freaked. They went to my parents' house and told me off for saying yes. In other words, they were completely blaming me for the whole thing, as if their own son didn't go buy a ring and ask me to marry him. He even did a beautiful proposal, which he had been planning for months. But at this point, his parents didn't even know that we were boyfriend and girlfriend. When they came to my house, his mom, my now mother-in-law, started crying and yelling at me. She told me that I was ruining their family, that I was trying to steal her son, and that all I really cared about was their money. By the way, my parents were middle class, but we were not destitute. His parents are very rich. They own several businesses. But of course, I'm not after their money. That's when they said that if we did end up getting married, I would have to sign a prenup. And I said, yeah, I want to marry him because I'm in love. At this point, his parents knew they couldn't stop us. We were going to get married with or without their approval. But thankfully, his parents came around and let us get married. We had a quaint, small wedding. It was so magical. But his parents wanted him to go to college to play football. In other words, they wanted him to be the next Tom Brady. They made him train for hours, and they didn't even let us live together for the first year we were married. And because they were supporting him, he couldn't say no. They had us on a schedule. Could only see him for about 2 to 3 hours a day. And we were married. 2 years later, he's playing for a football team. But his parents keep thinking that I'm dragging him down. So now they're trying to convince him to leave me. Go to part 3. My father-in-law is trying to convince my husband to divorce me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, and this is the final part of the 3-part story time. I'm doing a full face of pink makeup. After a year of us being married, his parents did not allow us to live together because he needed to focus on football. So obviously, I was living with my parents. I was focusing on my own studies, but his parents did allow us to see each other 2 to 3 hours a day. Now, you might think my husband is a total pushover, but let me explain something. His parents paid for all of his training and his entire college tuition. They gave him the best of everything. He got sports massages every single day. They even installed a cold plunge in their backyard. They also had a full gym setup where he and his teammates would go work out every single day. In their house. Obviously, he did not have time for little old me. After a year of this, I couldn't take anymore. I wanted to be with my husband. So I gave him an ultimatum. That he tell his parents that he and I wanted to live together. That's all I wanted. I was even willing to pay for half of the rent. And he told his parents, they said fine. And they bought us a house. Obviously under my husband's name, not mine. Fast forward another year up until now. I've heard his dad tell him on several occasions that he needs to divorce me. That he could find a much prettier wife once he becomes bigger in the NFL. And I walked in on his mom telling him that maybe I can't even have kids. And that he should have me checked. My parents-in-law hate me. I sometimes feel like I am holding him back. They make us miserable. My parents think I should just walk away from the marriage, but I'm too in love. Should I confront my parents-in-law? Help me think of what I should say to them.
Storytime about my strict grandma. So a little background information. In January 2023, I was really looking forward to having a sleepover at my friend's house. But my grandma quickly shut that shit down because she said that my friend was, quote, emo, according to the way my friend dressed. Like early as 2024. Anyways, I tried to argue with her and say that that doesn't mean that she's a bad influence. But my grandma, stuck in her ways, just wasn't having it. Instead, she said that I was going to be staying the weekend at my aunt's house with my brother and my cousin. So while I was at my aunt's house, I decided to sneak over to my friend Oliver's house. Get your head out of the gutter. It was nothing like that. We both agreed to be strictly friends. Anyway, so I hung out at his house with him and his brother Connor, and we were giving each other's Instagrams a makeover. Now keep this in mind for later. We ended up changing my username to the Beaner 2.0. Oh, and when I said I snuck over Oliver's house, I mean for my grandma. Like, my aunt knew about everything, but my grandma wasn't watching me, so I didn't care to tell her. Fast forward, the weekend's over, my grandma comes to pick us up, and later on that night, she brings up my Instagram username to me. Like for part Part 2 about my super strict grandma. So like I said, my grandma brings up my username, the Beaner 2.0, to me later on that night. She started telling me that she was super concerned about the lack of self-respect I had for myself and how I need to start caring more about what other people thought about me. But honestly, I didn't care. I tried explaining that I didn't mind the term Beaner since I'm half Mexican and I've already faced racism before, so to me, it's just a word. After I explained that, I thought that her and I were good because she stopped arguing with me. And then she starts bringing up my Instagram posts. She's like, who are these boys that you were with? Whose house is this? Blah, blah, blah. Because I guess my aunt had told her that I went over a friend's house, but she didn't specify that it was a boy. So my grandma was fine with it. Anyway, so she had a field day with that shit, and the next day she decided to take my phone away because of the consequences of my actions, claiming that this situation was so serious that she had to get the police involved. This whole situation resulted in me being grounded forever, and we had to start attending family therapy sessions after this. Yeah.
Then President Juarez declared May 5th the official anniversary of the Battle of Puebla, which we now know as Cinco de Mayo. Fast forward to the 1980s, something really interesting started happening. Beer companies started capitalizing on Cinco de Mayo. They started marketing their beer based around the holiday. And with that, it blew up. Americans started celebrating Cinco de Mayo everywhere, what we now know as Cinco de Mayo. It's a completely different and commercialized version of what Cinco de Mayo is. I'm sure if you went to any bar celebrating Cinco de Mayo, I think most people in there are not going to know why Cinco de Mayo is celebrated or that there was even a battle that happened in 1862. George W. Bush was the first president to celebrate Cinco de Mayo at the White House.
Cinco de Mayo is a day for special pride and remembrance for people on dos lados de la frontera. It's a reminder of the proud heritage of many Americans.
Nowadays, it seems like people assume that Cinco de Mayo is the Mexican Independence Day, which is completely wrong. That's in September. The U.S. made it into a consumerist holiday. People don't even know why they are celebrating it. And if you haven't followed me already, you should totally follow me, okay? Oh, I'm also a day late, but I was on a plane yesterday, so that's my excuse. Bye!
Get ready with me to go out to the bar with my friends. Usually I'll go to the clubs that are like super busy, but tonight I'm kind of just looking for a chill night where I can just wear my jean shorts and my crop top instead of putting on a whole outfit. And also I really do not feel like having a million other people sweat all over me. I've had a lot of you guys ask me how I do my eyes, so I'm going to show you how I do like my smoky eyeliner wing. First thing that I do is I go in with Tattoo Studio by Maybelline and I do my waterline, and when I do it on the bottom, I stop like right to where my eye is right there. And then after that, I'm gonna go in with eyeliner and I'm just gonna do it very tightly against my lash line. And then after I do that, I'm gonna make a super small wing. Then I'm gonna go in with the tattoo liner again. I'm gonna make a, put a little bit right there. Go in with an angled brush like this. And I just start to pull this up. And then if I feel like it needs to be a little blended out, I'll go in with my beauty blender and I'll just kind of blend it upwards. So then it'll end up looking like this. I just did my mascara on this eye and now we're going to do it on this one. So we're going to go in with the Lash Sensational Maybelline, and I just go and I make sure to close my eyes because I don't want to put it at the root. When you put it at the root, it weighs your lashes down. And I just got some PR from Makeup by Mario. These are their Moisture Glow Plumping Lip Serums, so I want to wear one of these tonight. We're going to try Nude Glow first. Okay, but she's actually kind of cute. This one is Petal Glow. I need to hurry up. Let me know what you guys think down below. I mixed Nude Glow with Petal Glow, and I kind of like
Storytime about how my boyfriend is abusive to his parents. What should I do? Disclaimer's not my storytime, it's on my Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 11 months. Here's a little backstory. We both work at the same company and live very far from our parents. I try to go home once a month since my parents are only 2 hours away from me. His parents live in a different country. For that reason, I haven't met his parents. But he's met my parents and he's been completely respectful and really nice to them. So I never suspected that he could be abusive to his parents. So here's what happened. We flew over to his parents and they are very rich. His mom is an interior designer and their house is phenomenal. His dad owns a couple of businesses and together they are very wealthy. His parents went to pick us up at the airport and everything was fine until we got to their house. They decided to give me a tour of their ginormous mansion. That's when I noticed that my boyfriend was being kind of rude to them. Every time they would ask me a question, he would answer and be like, duh, she likes pizza. He even asked his mom to stop asking stupid questions. I stopped him in his tracks and in front of his parents I said, why are you being rude to your parents? The look on his parents' face was of shock. And that's when I realized that they had never disciplined him. But then it got worse. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend is abusive to his parents. Disclaimer is not my story time. I said on Instagram. The look on his parents' face when I called him out for being rude to them was complete shock. After they gave me the tour of the house, we decided to sit down for dinner. They are so rich that they have their own chef. That's when the chef comes out and starts serving all the food. And as soon as my boyfriend sees what they served, he grabs his glass of water and bangs it against the table. He looks at both of his parents and says, "What the fuck is wrong with you both?" The color from their faces drain. That's when they said, "I'm sorry, we didn't know he was gonna make this." The chef decided to make a really fancy meatloaf. Apparently he hates meatloaf. Then he said, "Well, tell him to make something else." His mother gets up and runs to the kitchen and asks the chef to make him a burger, because that's his favorite food. Which, by the way, I never even knew that. He always told me his favorite food was Indian. His mom comes back from the kitchen, then he looks at me and says, "You don't have to eat that shit if you don't want to." I told him that he was being a brat and that I'd be happy to eat the meatloaf. His parents look at me and smile. My boyfriend just gets up from the table and runs away. Can you believe I had to chase after him? Part 3 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend is abusive to his parents. What should I do? Disclaimer is not my story time. It's on Instagram. That's when my stupid boyfriend runs away from the dinner table. So of course I have to chase him. And of course I'm angry at this point. I ask him why he's being so rude to his parents. Then he literally denies that he just did anything. His words were, "You're reading too much into it. My parents are stupid anyway." I looked at him and I said, "Do you not see the mansion we're standing in? How did 2 stupid people manage to build this mansion, 4 businesses, and put you through school?" He rolls his eyes at me and says, "Jesus Christ, you sound like my parents." I told him that he was a privileged rat. You see, I come from a family where we don't have chefs, and we don't have millions of dollars or a mansion. So I appreciate everything my parents did for me. I went back to the dining room and I told his parents it was nice to meet them, but that I could no longer be with their son. That's when his mom started begging me not to leave. It was hard, but I called an Uber and I went home. My boyfriend's been begging me to get back with him. He's trying really hard too. His parents are even offering to pay my student loans. I'm honestly confused now. What should I do?
Story time. I was the toxic best friend. So a little background information. I was 16 and a sophomore in high school. And at the beginning of the year, I met this girl who we're going to call Riley. Riley and I hit it off straight away. Like a week after knowing each other, she knew everything about me and I knew everything about her. Well, then she tells me about this guy that she's talking to, who we're going to call Jay. She said that they would hook up sometimes and he would text her sometimes. But she said that I couldn't tell anybody because he said that it had to be a secret. So I tried telling her that he sounded like a fuckboy, but she decided she was going to do whatever she wanted. And I was like, okay. So fast forward to the end of the year, he adds me on Snapchat. Okay, don't get me wrong. He was really hot, but I had my own thing going on. So I really didn't pay that much attention to him. And I thought he maybe added me on Snapchat to be like, oh my God, I really like your best friend. And then I also was caught between a rock and a hard place. Do I tell my best friend that the guy that she likes just added me on Snapchat? Or do I lie to her? Well, I was going to tell her until I got a Snapchat from him, like for part 2. Part 2 about how I was the toxic best friend. So like I said, I didn't know whether I should tell her that he added me on Snapchat or if I should. And I was going to until I got a Snapchat from him saying, "Hey, you're really pretty. I think we should talk sometime." So I ended up telling her about it because I felt really bad. And she was like, "This is why I can't trust girls. Like, you need to unadd him right now. Like, fucking block him." And I'm like, I didn't even do anything. Like, what the fuck? So whatever. I end up blocking him. It's fine. Until he texts me one day. And he's like, "Hey, it's Jay. I think you blocked me on Snapchat, LOL." And him and I had talked a little bit in school and I kind of started to like him. Well, fast forward, him and I ended up hooking up a few times. We were talking a lot. And he hadn't been texting Riley as much. Well, the one night while I was sleeping over at her house, my phone was going off a lot. And I didn't think to delete any of the messages, like for part 3.
Story time about how I found out my husband was hooking up with men off of Craigslist. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's not on Instagram. My husband and I have been married for 5 years. This man is the most prudish person I have ever met in my entire life. He never curses. He does not drink. Basically, he's never done anything naughty in his life. When we met, he was the perfect candidate for me. My parents are very religious and very strict. When they saw the way my husband was, basically super uptight, never wanting to do anything fun, they insisted that I marry him. So basically, this is all my parents' fault. To be honest with you guys, I never really was super attracted to him, but I knew that he would be a good provider. He's pretty high up in the company he works for, and he makes north of $300,000 per year. But I do own 2 of my own businesses, so it's not like I need him to survive. But my parents insisted on me marrying somebody who was already well off. And of course, one of my dreams is to become a mother, so I need a man who's going to be able to provide for me and my kids, especially when I'm pregnant. So we ended up getting married. Was there passion and chemistry? Not so much. But we did have a good time, and he would make me laugh. We essentially became really good friends. Up until I found some stuff on his laptop. Part two of how I found out my husband was hooking up with men off of Craigslist. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's me on Instagram. One day while I was working from home, I needed to get on his laptop to check our cameras. I just gotten a new set of security cameras for our house. I needed to make sure that they were all working. I opened his laptop, typed in the password, and it was wrong. It always had the same password for the past 5 years. I didn't bother texting him. Instead, I tried to guess. And because I know this man so well, I guessed it in the first try. But as soon as I log in, there's about 5 Craigslist windows open, all with similar titles. Male looking for male. Male interested in male company. This literally shook me to my core. You're telling me that I'm married to a gay man and that he's hooking up with men off of Craigslist? That's when I went ahead and checked his email, only to find that he had been sending pictures and other things to these men. Not only that, but he had met with 2 of them. I instantly printed out all the evidence. Like I said in part 1, I'm not particularly attracted to my husband. I never have been. I really only married him because my parents pressured me into it. Here's what I did. Instead of just asking for a divorce, I wanted to humiliate him. I needed to make him pay. After printing everything out, I sent it to his job. And I sent it to his parents and my parents. Part 3 is up. That's when I sent videos of my own husband hooking up with other men to his job, my parents, and his parents. At this point, I had been married to a man that I wasn't attracted to for 5 years, only to find out that he was hooking up with other men off of Craigslist. Remember I said in part 1 how prudish my husband was? He always made himself seem like he was the perfect man, like he had never done anything bad in his life. But let me tell you, some of the things I read in those emails, and the pictures, and the video, disgusting. No wonder he put off having kids for so long. And no wonder he made me get on the pill, because he never had the intention of having kids. When everyone received their packages, my husband called me super upset. He said that he had only done it for about a week, and that it was just him experimenting. And he told me that his job put him on suspension. My parents, of course, stopped speaking to him. My mother-in-law calls me on the phone and tells me that she had always known that he was gay. And apparently they insisted on him not marrying me. But he was set on having the perfect wife. The perfect life. We're obviously getting a divorce now, and I'm getting all his money. Or at least I'm gonna try. He's already claiming that I'm obsessed with him, so he wants to get a restraining order. I need to make him suffer even more. How should I do this? Part 4 will be up soon.
Storytime about why I will never let my sister pet sit for me ever again. So a little background information. I was 18 and it was the summer before my freshman year in college. And it was towards the end of the summer, so I decided that I wanted to take a vacation with a few of my girlfriends before we all went off to the different colleges that we were going to. And I have a lot of pets. I have 4 hamsters, 2 snakes, a tarantula, 2 birds, and 1 fish. So I asked her if she could watch all of them. She said yeah, so I wrote her out a schedule of when they need to be fed. And I wasn't even going to be gone a week, so it would be pretty easy because I already cleaned all their tanks and everything like that. And I wasn't worried at all because I trusted my sister. She had 2 dogs and a cat, so I thought she was going to be fine. I called her the first 2 days. Everything seemed to be going well. And I called her on the 4th day and she didn't answer the phone. So I called my mom, asked her if she could get a hold of her. And my mom said that she spent the 2 days at her boyfriend's house, like for part 2. Part 2 about why I will never let my sister pet sit for me ever again. So like I said, I called my mom asking if she could get a hold of her, and she said that she spent the last 2 days at her boyfriend's house. And the worst part was, my sister was the only one with a key to my apartment. So my sister calls me the next day and she's like, hey, sorry, like I was at my boyfriend's house. And I was like, who fed the animals? And she was like, well, I just put enough in their cages so that way they would be fine for like 3 days. And she was like, don't worry, I'll sleep over there tonight to make sure they're okay. So I'm like having a fucking panic attack right now. Anyways, so fast forward, I get home early in the morning and my sister's sleeping on the couch, but my sister brought over her animals too. So I wake my sister up and I'm like, hey, like, how are all the animals? She's like, oh, they're fine. And then we walk into the kitchen and the fucking bird cage is open and my birds are missing and her cats are nowhere to be found. So now I'm freaking the fuck out. So then I go to check on the rest of my animals, like for part 3. Part 3 about why I will never let my sister pet sit for me ever again. So like I said, we walk into the kitchen and the bird cage is open and my birds are nowhere to be found and neither is her cat. So at that point, I run to check on all of my other animals. Thankfully, the snakes were fine, so I go to check on my tarantula and he's missing. So now I grabbed my sister's dogs, locked them in my room, and I went to go check on my hamsters. Yeah, she forgot to feed them the whole week, because one of them ate the other one. So at this point, I'm having like a mental fucking breakdown. And I'm moving all the furniture in the living room and everything like that. And we lift up the couch and we see her cat bolt out from under the couch. After that, I look under the couch and my bird is literally torn into pieces under the fucking couch. A few days later, she texted me and she was like, hey, like, I feel so bad. Like, let me buy you a new bird and a new tarantula. And to this day, 2 years later, I still don't know what happened.
This is how I found out my dad was following me on OnlyFans. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's not on Instagram. My mom and dad had me when they were really young. My mom was 17 and my dad was 19. For some reason, my mom doesn't like talking about him, so I never really found out exactly how they broke up. All I know is that they stayed together until I was 5 years old. Something really bad happened and then my mom kicked him out of the house. Like I said, I don't even know what happened. I was 12 years old, he begged my mom to come back, and she let him live in the apartment we had. But he's pretty much a deadbeat. He didn't help my mom pay for the bills. He didn't even want to get a job. He even went as far as begging my mom to become a stripper. He said that she would make way more money than the job she had. She was a secretary at the time. When I was 15, he left our house again. I never got a bad feeling from him when he was living with us though. With a lot of hard work, my mom was able to put me through college. I graduated and I got a really good job. I bought my mom and me a house and we moved in together. Then COVID happened and I lost my job. A friend suggested I start OnlyFans and I decided to do it. I started making a lot more money than I ever thought I would. Some months I was making around $20,000. This one guy would send me $1,000 every single week. In exchange for pictures. Part 2 is up. This is how I found out my dad was following me on OnlyFans. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on Instagram. So this one guy started sending me $1,000 every single week. In exchange, I would send him private photos. Everything was totally fine until he started asking me questions. He would ask me things like, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite dessert? Because it's OnlyFans, I never really answered honestly. But then one day he told me, you love The Little Mermaid, don't you? And I was like, what? Because The Little Mermaid was my favorite movie as a kid. Watched it at least 3 times a week when I was a kid. First I thought it was a cousin playing a joke on me, so I decided to block them. The next day I get another message. This one says, I remember how you used to love hot dogs. That's when I really shit myself. Because my dad and I would make hot dogs every single Friday. It was our thing together. Like I said, he was a deadbeat, so he couldn't afford anything more than cheap hot dogs. And that's when he said, I have a confession. And before I could reply, he said, I'm your dad. I felt so disgusted. I blocked him and then blocked him from my cell phone too. That's when he sends me a long text message explaining why he signed up to my OnlyFans. He said that he was just trying to get to know me, that all he really wanted was to get me back as his daughter. Then why ask for nudes? Part 3 is up. This is how I found out my dad was following me on OnlyFans. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. As soon as I read his long text message about why he signed up, I once again blocked him. 20 minutes later, there's a knock on my door. Yep, it's my fucking father. I started knocking on the door so hard my neighbors came out, called 911 and they came within a minute. I live in an area where there aren't too many people, so my house is really easy to find. Saw my dad walk to the backyard and try to get in through the back. That's when a cop stopped him and asked him what he was doing. Then he told the cop that I had invited him over. Then the cop comes to my door and asked me if I had invited him. I told him I didn't. Then I told the cop about OnlyFans. My dad was so ashamed he actually denied it. But of course I had all the receipts. I showed the cop my phone and the cop told him that he needed to leave me alone. He left my house and I didn't have the heart to tell my mom. But later that night, I see another person sign up to my OnlyFans. Turns out it was my dad again. This time he was offering me $3,000 for more pictures. And he confessed that he couldn't help but love me as a woman because I didn't grow up with him. Excuse me, sir? You raised me for half of my childhood. Wanted to get a restraining order, but the judge says it's not that easy. So now I'm considering closing my OnlyFans. I don't think it's fair though. What should I do?
Storytime about how my whole class found my teacher's OF. So a little background information. I was 16 and in 10th grade, and my best friend Maya and I were walking in the hallway getting ready for first period. Now, even this early in the morning, the rumor was already going around that Miss J had an OF. Fast forward, Maya and I get to first period. 10 minutes after class started, Miss J put a problem up on the board. After she gave us a little bit of time, she was like, okay, who can solve this? And as she's about to call on someone, there was this guy, Jake, in my class, who was passing notes to this one girl, Jessica. And if you're wondering why they were passing notes, it's because we were not allowed to have phones in this class, of course. Anyway, so then Miss J is like, can you read that to the class, blah, 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 blah. And the note literally said, did you hear about Miss J's OF? She finished teaching the rest of our class, but we didn't see her for like 3 days after that. And I guess she wasn't fired because she had an OF. It was because there were students subscribed to it. And she knew about those students that were subscribed to it, and she didn't do anything about it.
My roommate's boyfriend keeps harassing me and I don't know how to tell her. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. My roommate and I have been living together for 2 years now. Now, I wouldn't call her my best friend, but we are very close. I don't really talk about intimate things, but at the end of the night, she's always there and we usually have dinner together. Not really close to my family, so to me, it's important that she's there every single night. But here's where things get really shitty. Her and I both got boyfriends around the same time. I met my boyfriend through a friend and he is the sweetest, purest thing ever. This man cries at every single movie. But he travels a lot for work, so he's usually not there. Now, my roommate's boyfriend, he's a personal trainer and I'm pretty sure sure he takes steroids because he's always angry. Should I say aggressive? His behavior became super obnoxious to me right away. As soon as he would come over to the apartment, he would start saying things like, babe, your roommate is so hot. Like he would say that about me to my roommate. Of course, she tried to laugh it off, but I know it bothered her. One day, he even started joking about how he was gonna come into my room one night while I was asleep. Obviously, I did not find this funny. That's when I asked him to leave the apartment. He got so mad, he called me a bitch in front of my roommate and slammed a drawer. Do you think my roommate stood up for me? No. Part 2 is up. My roommate's boyfriend keeps harassing me and I don't know how to tell her. Disclaimer's not my story time, it's not me on Instagram. After he called me a bitch and left the apartment, I was terrified. First off, this guy is 6'2" and he's built like a truck. He's like pure muscle. So when he's yelling in my face and slamming drawers, of course I'm terrified. But my roommate does nothing. But it gets worse. 2 hours after he left, he sends me a text message saying, fuck you. And then he sends me a picture of him with his tongue out, giving me the middle finger. I got up to show it to my roommate, but that's when she actually asked to talk to me. She sat me down on the couch and she started telling me how he's such a good man, and how she's never been able to find anybody like him. Then she asked me if I could just try to get along with him. He even started crying and it broke my heart. So I decided to let it go. But the next time this guy came over, once again, he started playing super loud music. I came out of my bedroom because I was trying to work, and I asked him nicely to turn it down. At this point, my roommate was showering, so it was just him and me in the living room. But then he gets up from the couch and walks slowly towards me, looking me up and down. That's when he says, you wish you had a guy like me. I turned around and tried to walk back to my room, but he grabbed my arm and turned me around. Then he grabbed my face and tried to kiss me. I actually gagged. That's when he said to me that I was just playing and that I actually want him. The whole time he was squeezing my arm so hard, I finally got away and went into my bedroom. And that's when he sent me a picture of his thing. I literally almost died. I walked out and kicked him out again. This time he didn't put up a fuss, but now I don't know how to tell my roommate. What the heck am I gonna do?
Story time. I'm in a long distance relationship and I don't know if I should break up with this boy or not. So a little background information. Him and I were best friends for almost a month before we started dating. And literally as soon as we started dating, he started asking me for nudes. And I would be like, no, not tonight, I'm tired. And then he would keep asking me why. And then he would start to make me feel guilty about not wanting to send him nudes. Eventually, he would just say, it's fine, I'll just wait until we can do physical things together. And he still has, quote, his hoes on Snapchat. And he still has all of their nudes and everything. And literally the day before we started dating, he told me that he liked this one girl. And he'll always hang up the phone to talk to her instead of me. And then when I bring it up, he tries to say that So obviously I try and bring this up to him, and he tries to make me feel bad by saying that he thinks about unaliving himself. He also has a few other red flags, like for part 2. Story time. I'm in a long distance relationship with this boy and I don't know if I should break up with him or not. So like I said, he says he always thinks about unaliving himself, so obviously I feel bad for him and I just love him so much that I can't let him go, and he has a bunch of other red flags. Like he'll tell people he's 13 and other people he's 14, and he apparently didn't know his birthday. Well, fast forward, he's been texting me more, and when I told him I loved him, he left me on open, which he never does. He always says it back to me. We still haven't really been talking on the phone, but I did send him pictures. Not fully nude, but both times I sent those, he literally called me right after. But other than that, he will never call me.
My boyfriend's brother got me pregnant and now I don't know what to do. 3 months ago, I started dating this new guy. He was so sweet and good looking. He took me to meet his very rich family right away. I walked into their beautiful house and his brother came right up to me and gave me a kiss. Now let me say this. My boyfriend and his brother are almost exactly identical. They are both extremely good looking. They're both super muscular and really good shape. They both have long brown hair. They both have green eyes and tan skin. I mean, they are virtually perfect looking. Here's the difference. My boyfriend is so sweet, while his brother is more of a bad boy. Flirts with me in front of his whole family. And they all think it's hilarious, even my boyfriend. But here's the problem. The more I visited their house, the more I realized I was getting butterflies every time I saw his brother. And it's like his brother knew it. He would look deep into my eyes while we had conversations. He always looked like he was about to kiss me. One day my mother-in-law decided to take me shopping to Bloomingdale's. She ended up buying me a $2,000 necklace. These people have money. When we got back to the mansion, I decided to put the necklace on. But as I was struggling, my boyfriend's brother decided to help me out. Slowly put the necklace on me. Then he started smelling my neck. Then he started kissing my neck. And then he started kissing me and we started making out. I couldn't help it. Part 2 is up. That's when my brother-in-law started kissing my neck. Then he made his way to my mouth and we started making out. passionately. I physically couldn't stop myself from kissing him. After we kissed for a minute, we realized we were in the kitchen. Anybody could walk in on us. That's when he grabbed my hand and took me outside by the pool. He took me behind the pool house and then we just started kissing more. We were back there for like 20 minutes. So my phone rings and it's my boyfriend, his brother. I push him off and I run back into the house. For the rest of the night, he just kept staring at me, and I basically just tried to avoid his gaze. We didn't talk about the fact that we kissed at all for like 2 weeks. After the 2 weeks, I found myself alone in their house again. He comes up to me and starts trying to kiss me again, but this time I did have a little more self-control. He did something I never expected. He picked me up straight off the couch, threw me over his shoulder, and took me to his bedroom. Then he started kissing me more. And again, I gave in. I couldn't help myself. It's like I physically can't stop myself from touching him. He kissed on his bed and then it happened. Yep, we did it. It was amazing and magical, but I instantly felt remorse. Let me clear something up though. I am still very, very attracted to my boyfriend. I mean, if anything, I would have rather done it with him, but there's just something about his brother that I find intoxicating. I instantly felt sick to my stomach. I left his room and went back home. My boyfriend called me and asked me why I wasn't waiting for him at his house. I told him that I didn't feel sick, so he came over and brought me chicken soup. I just did the dirty with his brother and he brought me chicken soup? You can imagine how guilty I felt. 2 weeks later, I wasn't getting my period. So I took a test and it turns out I'm pregnant. And I'm pretty sure it's his brother's. I broke the news to him and his family that I'm pregnant and they're so happy. He proposed to me and we're engaged now. His brother, on the other hand, still tries to kiss me. But he just got a new girlfriend. We'll never tell the truth though. Or should I?
Storytime. Karma didn't do its job fast enough, so I had to take matters into my own hands. So a little background information, my best friend Ellie had just passed away in a car crash, and for some reason these two girls, Jackie and Jayla, decided that they were going to talk shit on her all the time for no reason. Like they had some weird unhealthy obsession with her for no reason. Like the one time they literally put me in a group chat just so that way I could see them talking shit about her. So I told my best friends Christy and Megan about it, and we decided to come up with a plan to jump them. So in the morning and after school, Jayla and Jackie would walk by my house to get to theirs. So obviously we weren't going to do it in the morning because nobody had the energy for that. But we got baseball bats and everything else. And we did end up using them. Like we ran up on them after school and we started to beat the out of them. I don't want this video to get taken down, so use your imagination because it was pretty bad. And both of them ended up in the ER. One girl was in a coma for the week and the other one had a broken collarbone. They ended up pressing charges, but my thing is, this is a girl who can't defend herself, so I would have done it anyway. Storytime about why you should stay away from guys who just got out of a long-term relationship. So a little background information, I was 14 and I was in high school. And I had just moved from a normal high school to a special education unit where there was only about 60 to 90 kids. And I met this guy named Robert, and he was supposedly the most popular guy in school. He was a grade above me, and he was super hot. He definitely had a reputation with the girls, and his body count was higher than his age. Well, I have a single stay-at-home mom, and her and I haven't had the best relationship, and she's kind of strict but also kind of not. Like, for example, sis will let me get my belly button and my tongue pierced, but will not let me hang out with boys. Does that make sense? Absolutely not, but here we are. Well, somehow Robert and I started talking, and then we started dating, and everything was going super good. I was seeing him every day, spending every single hour that I possibly could with him, until I came home one day with a hickey on my neck, like for part 2. Part 2 about why you should stay away from a guy who has just gotten out of a long-term relationship. So like I said, him and I started dating, and the one day I came home with a hickey on my neck. I didn't sleep with him, but him and I were fooling around. But my mom went psychotic. She grounded me. I wasn't allowed to see or speak to Robert ever again. Which was stupid because I'm a 14-year-old girl who's in love with a boy. I'm definitely going to find a way to talk to him. So now this led to me thinking that he was going to get bored and not want to be with me anymore. So finally, 2 months later, my mom was letting up and she let me go out with my friend Lauren. But we ended up just going to Lauren's house so that way Robert could come and see me. And I think I forgot to mention a few red flags. All of my friends told me that Robert had an ex-girlfriend of 4 years that he was absolutely in love with. But that wasn't the worst one. He told me that he was never going to get over his ex and that he was always going to want to be with her. And then he asked me to be his girlfriend 2 days later. And we're going to call her Lucy. Well, I posted a few TikToks and Lucy's best friend Ellie commented on my TikToks, like for part 3.
My husband told me he wants a second wife. We are practicing Mormons and my husband believes that he deserves a second wife. When we first got engaged, I told him that the only way I would marry him was if he did not take on more wives. We've been married now for 6 months and he's already begging me to get a second wife. Part of me understands why he wants it, but the other part of me thinks it's just gratuitous. No man needs more than one wife. I met a few single women at church and he's been flirting with them nonstop. One of them in particular has been flirting back. Everyone in our church knows that my husband is not allowed to have another wife. This one girl keeps trying to get into our lives. She basically shows up everywhere we do, and she's always trying to catch his eye when we're at church. I found out a dirty little secret about her. A few years ago, she used to be a stripper. I threatened her to stay away from my husband. If not, I would tell him that she was a stripper. She actually told me that my husband wouldn't believe me and that she was gonna marry him anyway. I caught them texting and she was telling him how lonely she is. I told my husband that she was a stripper and he said that he didn't care. That she needed saving? What the heck should I do now? I don't want a second wife. My husband told me he wants a second wife update. That's when my husband told me that he still wants to marry her and that the church could save her. Since the news of her being a stripper in the past didn't turn him off, I had to start digging some more. I went onto her Facebook and started looking back through all of her pictures. I also went on her friends and family's Facebooks too. On one of her friends' accounts, I found a post from 2012. They were partying it up in the Greek islands. As I looked closer into the picture, I saw there were two men with them. I started Googling the men's names and I found that they were both pimps. The more I searched, the more pictures I found of her with this one guy. And in some of the pictures, they were even making out. This is when it hit me. She was probably a pro. And this guy was pimping her out. My husband is so 2000s that he doesn't even have a computer. So I decided to go print out all of the evidence. I printed out all of the pictures of her and this guy, some of her family's pictures of her drinking and partying. I made my husband his favorite dinner and then I sat him down. Told him I would never accept a second wife, especially her. When I showed him all the pictures, he told me he felt sick. Apparently, she told him that she was a nun. Remember I said they had been texting? Well, they never stopped texting. Then he confessed that she even sent him a naked picture. Part 2 is husband told me he wants a second wife update, and he finally accepted that this woman had been a pro in her past and a stripper. He said that he would stop speaking to her. Mind you, this all happened like 2 days ago. I asked my husband to show me his phone so that I could see the messages between them. He handed his phone over and started to cry. He said that she had lied to him and told him that she was a nun. Apparently, after she became a stripper, she decided to leave that life and become a nun. How stupid is my husband that he actually believed her? That's when I saw that she had sent him plenty of nudes. And I asked my husband, "You think that this woman is a nun?" And he said, "You're right, I should have known." We went to church and told on her. Now everyone in the church knows her truth. But things get worse. After she found out that we told on her, she came over to our house and started threatening us. Wouldn't let her in the house, but then she begged my husband to let her in. And he opened the damn door. That's when she begged my husband to take her on as a second wife, and that she would be the best wife and even better than I am. While I'm standing right there. Thankfully, my husband used his one brain cell and said no. That's when she grabbed my hair and started banging my head against the wall. Stupid husband stood there watching. I had to fight her off alone. That's when she looked at both of us and said that we would regret it, and she ran away. And my husband had another confession. They had hooked up once. Part 3 is up.
Storytime about why my best friend cut me off. So a little background information, I was 24 and I had a full-time job as a nurse, and I had been best friends with this girl since we were in 7th grade. As soon as she turned 21, she got married, had a kid, and just like any young tragic love story, her boyfriend, who was way older than her, left her for some girl who just turned 18. So I ended up letting her move in with me. She had too much pride to go back to her mom's house. I ended up kicking her out of my house though, because she would have random guys over 24/7, and she would smoke you know what in my house. So I had the cops called on me 24/7 because my neighbors could smell it. So fast forward to now, she's living with her mom. Her and I got over that fight, and she decided that she wanted to go to college. I was so proud of her, but she asked me if I could watch her kid when she had to go into school because she was doing mostly online. So of course I said yes, I wanted her to succeed. Like for part 2. Part 2 about why my best friend cut me off. So like I said, she finally decided to go to college. Me being super happy for her, I would watch her kid whenever she would have to go into school. Well, the one night I'm making dinner and her kid's in the living room, I'm in the kitchen, and I go into the living room to tell him that dinner is ready. And I see my dog backed up into a corner and him with a fire poker, literally poking my dog. I wouldn't even call it poking, he was pretty much trying to stab my dog. My dog has its ears back, it's shaking with anxiety. So I go over and I rip it out of his hands and I smack his fingers. And I tell him, we do not do that to the dog. Like, what is wrong with you? So my friend comes, picks him up. A few days later, she comes to drop him off again. And she says, "Hey, can I talk to you?" I already knew what it was about, so I was expecting this. She was like, "Gavin told me that you hit him last time he was here." And I was like, yeah, he pretty much was stabbing my dog. And then she's like, "Oh, well, you know, he doesn't mean any harm. He plays with the dogs like that at home." Like, okay, sis, this
Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimers is not my story time instead of me on Instagram. The bitch that used to be my best friend, yeah, she's the worst person in the entire world. By the time I met her, my boyfriend and I had already been going out for 6 months. I met her through some friends and her and I got along really well. She was wild and crazy and she brought that wild and crazy side out of me. And at the time it was something that I did need, but I didn't realize just how wild she was. Let me tell you what this girl was like. She was the type of girl that would try to bring up sex in every conversation. Like, no matter who we we were talking to, she would always bring up sex. She would always try to impress everyone about how much she knew about it and how much she needed sex all the time. And sometimes I would ask her to not talk about it so much, and her response to that was, "Stop being such a prudy bitch." My boyfriend and I decided to have all our friends over at my apartment for dinner. Since I had just met her, I decided to invite her over. This was the first time she was meeting my boyfriend and all of my friends. And of course, she proceeded to monopolize the entire conversation all night, and all she talked about was sex. Then she went to the bathroom and took off her jacket. She came out in her bra and shorts. Part 2 is a story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. That's when she came out of the bathroom in her bra and a pair of shorts. Mind you, we have a bunch of our friends over having dinner at my place. I get up from the table and I ask her what's up. That's when she says that it's way too hot in my apartment and that I needed to turn down the temperature. I told her I'd give her a t-shirt if she wanted to, and she said no. I'm comfortable in my body and I don't care if people look at me. When I look around, I see everyone staring at her. Obviously, all the guys are like oogling her goodies, but all the girls that are there with their guys are instantly upset. That's when my boyfriend bursts out laughing and says, "What's wrong with her?" She just starts laughing maniacally at what my boyfriend said. Then she goes and sits down next to my boyfriend and starts joking with him. You might be thinking I'm so stupid for this, but I decided to let it go. Oh yeah, she's also the type of person that never wants to go home. That's when I had to be honest with her, and I told her that she was making everyone uncomfortable. And I asked her to leave, which she did. A few days later, she comes over to my place so that we can get ready to go out. My boyfriend was gonna go out with his friends and I was gonna go out with her. 2 seconds after she comes into my apartment, she walks out of the bathroom completely naked. And my boyfriend's just sitting there on the couch watching her. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. That's when she comes out completely naked. You could see everything. Boobs, butt, and V. And my boyfriend is sitting on the couch. As she comes out of the bathroom, his jaw drops to the floor. Then she says to me, "Oh my god, I couldn't find a towel, sorry." She walks straight into the guest bedroom where she has her clothes. My boyfriend and I look at each other and I'm completely disgusted. He, on the other hand, thought it was hilarious, so he starts laughing. Then she comes out of the guest bedroom in panties and a bra. I mean, I guess at least she wasn't naked this time. That's when I tell her, "Do you need help getting dressed or something?" She says, "Oh no, girl, I'm just thirsty. I'm gonna get something to drink." So I said to her, "I'll get you something to drink. You can go get dressed." At this point, I had it. But guess what? This wasn't the last time. A few weeks later, I wanted to go to her place to get ready this time. But then she insisted on coming over to mine instead. That's when I got the feeling that she had done all of that to get my boyfriend's attention. And I straight up told her, "Are you just walking around naked at my place just because you want my boyfriend to see you?" Of course, she denied it. She says, "He's cute, but he's not that cute." What? Part 4 is up. Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on Instagram. At this point, she had been naked in front of my boyfriend twice, but it wasn't the last time. She came over to pick me up one time and I told her to wait for me downstairs. Well, instead of waiting for me downstairs, she decided to come up to my apartment. While I was in the bedroom changing, my boyfriend let her in. That's when she comes straight into my bedroom without even knocking and says, "Hey girl, do you have a dress I can wear?" The dress she was wearing was absolutely perfect. I asked her why and she said that she didn't feel sexy enough. Without even me saying yes, she started raiding my closet. Then she pulls out a very expensive dress I had not even put on yet. My boyfriend was standing in the doorway just watching the whole thing go down. I look at my boyfriend and he just rolls his eyes at me. Then out of nowhere, she takes off her dress and she's completely naked underneath. She looks at my boyfriend and says, "Oh, sorry, I didn't see there." My boyfriend turned around and walked away. I finally closed the door and confronted her about it. She told me that I'm a prude and that I needed to relax. I kicked her out and we haven't spoken since. She's been begging to talk to me and hang out. My boyfriend told me that if I felt uncomfortable around her, then for her not to come over. But he says that he's fine with her. His reaction also upset me too. What should I do?
Story time about how I tried to stick up for this kid on the bus, but it got me suspended. So a little background information, I was 12 and in 7th grade. So it was a Wednesday, and when school ended, I got on the afternoon bus. And there was this boy named Josh that I was friends with. So I went and I sat next to him on the bus. After like 5 minutes of us waiting for the bus driver to get back on the bus, this boy named Kai, that everybody loves for some reason, comes over and rips me out of the seat. After that, he sits down next to Josh and starts punching him and screaming at him. So I grab this kid by his book bag, rip him out of the seat, and I sit next to Josh. I put my headphones in, plug in my phone, and this kid grabs the phone, throws it at the front of the bus. And there weren't any adults on the bus at this time because our bus driver was using the bathroom. And I didn't go up and get my phone because I knew that if I moved, this kid was probably going to hurt Josh again. So then this kid starts trying to punch me. So I punch him in the stomach. An adult comes on the bus, finally, like for part 2. Part 2 about how I got suspended for trying to stick up for some kid on the bus. So like I said, this kid is starting to try to punch me. So I punch him in the stomach. Finally, an adult gets on the bus. She yells at us to all sit down. And by the way, all the little fucking 12-year-olds had their phones out recording what was happening. So they look at the cameras, they were interviewing some of the kids, and Josh's sister comes up to me, and I was like, oh, shit. Hopefully she's not going to yell at me. I don't know why she would, but still. She was like, hey, I just wanted to say thank you for sticking up for my brother. So then after a little bit, I hear my name get called on the speaker. Kai, Josh, and I were all called down to the office. All of our parents were there. Kai got a 3-day suspension and I got a 3-week suspension. Even though I literally had scratches all over my freaking arms and Kai didn't even have a bruise on him. Well, my mom, being the boss-ass bitch that she is, she told the school that if they went through with my suspension, she would call the news and tell them that my school was letting kids get away with bullying.
I hid under my boyfriend's bed for 2 days and tried to poison him. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 3 months. And when we started dating, I got really jealous. He was my first boyfriend and I just didn't know how to control my feelings. You can say I'm pretty toxic. Part of the reason why I'm so insecure is because my boyfriend is probably one of the most popular guys in school. He's a basketball player and he's about to be drafted. So all the girls are constantly trying to hook up with him. And this drives me insane. Whenever we go out, girls are falling over trying to get to him. A few weeks ago, I heard a rumor that my boyfriend had hooked up with a girl. When I asked him about it, he got really defensive. He got so angry he punched a hole in my wall. And well, this made me start thinking, maybe he was cheating on me. So I basically started stalking him. And that's what I've been doing for the past 2 weeks. I'm even skipping class just to go wherever he's going. That's when I decided that I would hide in his room. I even put on a diaper. Part 2 is up. Put on the diaper so that I could hide under my boyfriend's bed without having to get out. Disclaimer is not my story time, was sending me on Instagram. I even took soft food with me so that he wouldn't hear me chewing. I knew he wouldn't be home, so I snuck into his dorm room. That's when I checked his entire room. I went through all of his clothes, even went through all of his dirty laundry just to smell them and make sure he didn't have anything in his pockets. Searched in between the mattresses and I found nothing. At this point, I was just looking for a sign of him having hooked up with somebody. I knew he was going to be coming home soon, so I snuck under the bed. It was pretty hidden underneath there because it's a huge bed. He came in by himself and started changing and went to take a shower. But he took his phone with him into the bathroom, so I didn't have a chance to check it. By the way, he thought that I had gone home to my parents' house, so he wasn't going to be hanging out with me at all. As he was getting ready, he put on cologne, and that's when I knew he was going to go look for another girl. A few hours later, he comes back and I'm still underneath the bed. And guess what? He's with a girl. The same girl I heard the rumor about. They come in there laughing and I can tell that they're clearly drunk. This girl goes to the bathroom and changes into lingerie. And then they started making out on the bed while I'm hiding underneath it. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend is making out with this girl on his bed. I'm hiding underneath it. Suddenly, she starts talking about how she's so happy they're finally a couple. How she's so happy he got away from me since I was such a crazy ex. Clearly, my boyfriend had been poisoning me against her. That's when I realized I really couldn't blame the girl. My boyfriend had clearly told her that he had broken up with me and that now he was with her. My plan was to initially get out of the bed and surprise them, but instead, I decided to wait. I managed to set up my phone while they were doing it on the bed, and I recorded the entire thing. After they finally finish, she leaves. My boyfriend goes to take a shower, and I finally come out underneath the bed. And I sit on his bed. And the look on this man's face when he comes out of the bathroom, priceless. But the best part is that I was filming the entire thing. At this point, I was still wearing the diapers because I had been under his bed for 2 days. I'm obviously looking rough. Then I tell him that I've been under his bed for the entire 2 days. He started calling me crazy and he tried to kick me out. Then I told him that he needs to break up with the girl and come back with me. If he didn't, I would send the video around to the entire school, including his coach, who is the girl's dad. I got him pretty good. So now he's still my boyfriend, although it's forced, to get back at him somehow. I'll keep you guys updated. Bye.
Story time about how my mom got with my sister's boyfriend. So a little background information. I was 13 and in 8th grade, and my sister was a senior in high school and she was 17. And my sister always had a new boyfriend. Like after 3 months of dating somebody, they would break up and then she would be with a new guy a month later. And this started whenever she was a sophomore. So yeah, she had a lot of boyfriends. Anyway, so she had started dating this boy, and we're gonna call him Ben. Well, lucky for Ben, whenever they started dating was right around the time when we were supposed to go on our vacation that we take every year. So my mom and dad said that he could come with us. So my sister, who we're gonna call Emily, she decided to bring Ben, and I decided to bring one of my friends, Carly. We drove down, everything was good for the first 2 days, and usually what would happen on this vacation is my dad would end up staying at the hotel and doing work while we were all out doing stuff. So my mom, Ben, and Emily were all out drinking at the bar 24/7. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my mom got with my sister's boyfriend. So like I said, Emily, Ben, and my mom were out drinking 24/7 at the bar. And since this was a vacation that we took every year, my sister already knew a bunch of people down there. The one night my mom started feeling really sick at the bar, so Ben offered to take her back to the hotel. And at this time, my friend, my dad, and I were all down at the buffet in the hotel. So Ben took my mom upstairs to our hotel room, and my dad was like, oh, do you guys want to walk down to the fair? We said yes, so he told us to go upstairs and get his wallet. So my friend and I go up in the elevator to our room, and I want to say this was about 20 or 30 minutes after Ben and my mom had went upstairs. So we get into the room, we hear the shower running, which was weird because we didn't think anybody was there. So instead of me calling my dad because it might have been a murderer, I go and the door is slightly creaked open, so I look through the door, and obviously I could hear you know what, but hers and his clothes were on the floor. Like for part 3.
The asshole for wanting to expose my lying, cheating mother. A month ago, I borrowed my mom's phone and she had no idea, but I looked at all of her apps and found that she was cheating with multiple men. I'm 26 years old and my parents have now been married for 30 years. I actually got separated when I graduated from high school, but then they got back together a few years later. My mom has always been the one that wants to separate my dad, but he keeps wanting to get back together with her. My dad is actually in love with this woman. He adores her. He does everything for her. He's super affectionate with her, loves to take her out on dates, gives her so much of his time, and she still doesn't appreciate it. I've always been closer to my dad than my mom. My mom's always trying to find an excuse to go party with her friends, but now I know why. Like I said, I ended up borrowing her phone and she probably didn't expect me to go snooping. And honestly, it wasn't even my intention. I'm scrolling on her phone and I see the app Tinder. I nearly fell out of my seat. So I quickly scrolled through everything and started taking pictures. My mom was sending nudes to random men. Part 2 is up. Am I the asshole for wanting to expose my lying, cheating mother? That's when I saw that she was sending nudes to men on different apps. Not only was she on Tinder, she was also on Bumble and an app for older people. Mind you, my father is still in love with this woman. I managed to take pictures of everything on the apps. Here's the worst part. Start going through her messages and that's when I found that she has a boyfriend. At that point, I didn't know how long they'd been together. Now I know that she's been with him for 6 months. So every single time she goes on her weekend trips with her friends, she's actually with her boyfriend. And get this, she uses my dad's money to pay for everything. An entire week passed before I confronted her. First, I didn't know how to confront her, but I had to just do it. Every time I saw my dad, I would start to cry and he was worried about me. I didn't have the heart to tell my dad until I confronted my mom. I went up to her and I showed her all the receipts I had. So she got pissed at me for looking through her phone. By the way, at this point, I'm still living with my parents. That's when she threatened to kick me out of the house if I told my dad anything. My own mother threatening me. Then she tried to smack me across the face, so I smacked her. Part 3 is up. Am I the asshole for wanting to expose my lying, cheating mother? After she slapped me, I slapped her back. And I slapped her so hard she actually fell on the floor. I instantly felt bad and tried to apologize. That's when she started to cry and I started to cry. I asked her to just be honest with me and tell me the truth. She told me that she wasn't in love with my dad anymore, but that she felt bad for him because he was still in love with her. And that she'd been dating this new guy for 6 months. She even confessed that she was addicted to going on dating apps and flirting with men. That's when I told her she needed to tell my dad. That she needed to stop using his money to take her boyfriend out. Then another confession. She had spent over $25,000 on hotels that she would book for her and her new boyfriend. And apparently this guy was broke. He couldn't pay for himself. She tried to negotiate with me. If I don't tell my dad, she'd break up with her boyfriend and stop using the apps. I mean, she's my mother and I don't want to cause her pain, but it's my dad. I ended up telling her that I wouldn't tell my dad. But 2 nights ago, my dad went on a work trip. My mom is so stupid she actually snuck in her boyfriend through her window. I heard them doing the dirty all night. Now she's begging me again not to tell my dad. I'm planning on telling my dad tonight. I'll have to keep you guys updated. Give me advice.
Story time about how I almost got kidnapped by my online boyfriend. So a little background information, I was 16 and in 11th grade. So a year before this all happened, I posted a picture on Instagram saying, add me on Snapchat if you want to be friends. Yes, I was that person. Anyway, so this really cute guy adds me on Snapchat. And after about 3 months talking, he said that he wants to meet me in person. And he didn't sound sus at all, so I was like, sure. So we met at this park that was like 30 minutes away. We met there around 6 o'clock, so when the sun was setting. And he was super nice. It was super romantic. Well, then we went to his house. We watched a movie and we did the nasty. So after that, he asked me if I want a drink. And what I could have swore was 20 minutes later, I wake up in an abandoned farm shed with no clothes or anything. So I start screaming my head off. I don't have my phone or anything, so I start to run. And then he grabs me. He says, if you try to run or you try to scream, I am going to kill you. Life for part 2 about how I almost got kidnapped by my online boyfriend. So like I said, I wake up in this abandoned farm shed. I don't have no clothes. I don't have a phone. So I try to run and he grabs me. He says that if you run, I will kill you. So I was like, okay, fine. What do you want from me? So he starts putting on lingerie and tells me to also put some on so we can take pictures together. What the actual you know what? So after that, he starts crying and he starts telling me his whole life story and how he's not who I think he is. Turns out that he's 32 and he just goes online pretending that he's 17 years old. So I just try to comfort him, right? It ends up working. He brings me my clothes, tells me to run, or else he's going to, once again, kill me. So I run, I go to this gas station, get picked up by the police, find my parents. Luckily for me, I paid attention to where everything was. He was arrested, he's still in prison to this day, and I got grounded for 3 months.
Story time about how my husband died and his best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. My husband and I were married for almost a decade. During that time, we had 2 kids. And of course, his passing was completely devastating to our families. And 2 weeks after my husband died, I was still grieving. But his best friend started coming around our house a lot. First, he was very emotional. Him and my husband were best friends for about 7 years. They saw each other almost every day. Not only did they work together, but they also would go to the gym together and pretty much hang out all the time. So I know this guy really, really well. When my husband would invite him over, I never got the feeling that he liked me. I mean, sure, sometimes I caught him staring at me, but I'm beautiful, so I understand. So after my husband passed, he started coming over as in, I want to take care of you, and we would just kind of cry together. I took this as his way of trying to help my husband, you know, so I just thought he was being really sweet. But exactly 1 month after my husband passed away, he started asking me weird questions. Number 1, do you want to start dating again? Number 2, don't you feel lonely at night? Number 3, you're still so young and beautiful. You need to give yourself a chance with someone else. Mind you, I'm still grieving. To these questions, I would usually say no. Obviously, I mean, why would I even be thinking about those things? I didn't put too much mind to the questions, but a few days later, he came over after he had been at a bar. As soon as I opened the door to him, he said, "Can I kiss you?" And then he did without me saying yes. Part 2, story time about how my dead husband's best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimer, is not my story time, was sent me on Instagram. As soon as I opened the door, he asked me if he could kiss me, and I didn't say anything. And he grabbed me and just started kissing me. Of course, I pushed him away and told him that he needed to leave. That's when he said, "But you didn't say no." I told him I didn't say anything because I was shocked he would even ask me that. That's when he walked into the house without me inviting him, went straight to the fridge and opened up a beer. Then he starts yelling at me for giving him mixed signals. He says that since my husband died, all I've been doing is flirting with him. Since when is grieving flirting? I told him that he was completely wrong and that he needed to leave again. Then he said, "No, I'm not leaving here until you tell me the truth." That I was secretly in love with him and that I actually wanted to be with him. No, this wasn't funny to me at all. He was slurring his words and barely could stand up. I knew my kids were upstairs, so all I wanted to do was get him out of the house. That's when I grabbed my phone and started texting one of my other husband's best friends. I texted him 911, "Please come to our house now." He responded right away saying, "I'm coming over." After another minute of this guy ranting at me, I told him I was sorry for giving him mixed signals and that was never my intention, blah, blah, blah. Then he asked me out on a date. He said that he wanted to take me out and show me a good time. I said no, and I asked him to leave again, but he wouldn't. Finally, someone knocks on the door. Part 3 is story time about how my dead husband's best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimer, is not my story time, send me on Instagram. That's when he asked me out on a date and started walking closer to me. Finally, someone knocked on the door, and it was my other husband's friend who I texted to come help me. I ran over to the door quickly and I opened it. That's when my husband's best friend, who was drunk in my house asking me out on a date, forcing me to kiss him, tells the other guy that he needs to leave. So I asked the other friend if he could just take this guy home. He said, "Yeah, of course." And he told him, "You're drunk, I'm gonna take you home now." They left together without incident and I was really relieved. But after that, I knew to watch my back now. So here's what happened. He started texting me every now and then asking me if I wanted to go to dinner. And I would not even respond to him. And after that, he started showing up to different places I was at. For example, I go to Pilates classes 5 times a week. This place is near my house. And one day he just showed up trying to take a class. As soon as I saw him, I told the instructor and they kicked him out. That's when he came back and said that he did nothing wrong and that he deserved to be in the class too. He even paid the year up front. So they had no choice but to let him in. Instead, I left. Then he followed me outside to the parking lot and told me that I needed to relax. Said, "It's not like I'm following you," which he clearly was. I got in my car and left. That very same night, he sent me a message apologizing for acting crazy. Then he told me that all he wanted was just to be close to me and the kids. By the way, my kids really do love him. They ask about him all the time since he stopped coming over, and I don't even know what to tell them. After a few weeks of him not acting crazy, he asked me if he could come over and I said yes. Decided to invite all my husband's friends and we had a nice dinner. But again, this guy asked me out. I said no, but my best friend thinks I should give him a shot. He's good looking and rich. What do you guys think?
Story time. My boyfriend cheated on me with the girl best friend. So a little background information. I was 17 and a junior in high school, and my boyfriend and I had been dating for a year. But just a little backstory about when we got together. So there were definitely some red flags that I missed, okay? One of them being that he had a girl best friend. And I don't care what y'all have to say if that makes me insecure or what, but coming from someone who has been the girl best friend, I knew this was not good at all. Especially whenever we first started dating and she was still being super friendly with him, meaning she would hold his hand, she would hang on him 24/7. And when I told him I was super uncomfortable with that and I felt like there needed to be some boundaries, he was like, yeah, I told you what it was whenever we got together. So if you don't like that, then just break up with me. Looking back on it now, that was also a red flag because I feel like he was telling me to break up with him so that way he didn't have to break up with me, like for part 2. Part 2 about how my boyfriend cheated on me with the girl best friend. So like I said, she would still hang all over him, and he pretty much told me, if you don't like that, then you can leave. Obviously, I did not want to leave because I liked him and he was my boyfriend. So I just kept putting up with it, and eventually, we got 6 months into our relationship. So at that point, I'm thinking maybe I have a little bit more authority, to be like, hey, I don't like the way that she acts around you. You guys can't hang out like that anymore. And they would hang out alone together. He would take her to dinner, which I literally tried telling him that the stuff that they do together is relationship stuff. And he was like, that's not true at all, because we did all of this stuff before you and I even got together. So anyways, like I said, 6 months in, I'm like, hey, I don't like the way that you guys are hanging around each other. Once again, he gives me the same excuse. So he pretty much said that he didn't care. And the one night him and I were supposed to hang out, but he canceled on me last minute. And her and I didn't get along, and she never Snapchatted me before, but then I get a Snapchat of her and him making out at his house.
My brother-in-law keeps trying to hook up with me. Should I tell my husband? My husband is a very, very jealous man. He can't stand it when I get hit on or even stared at. The few times that I've gotten hit on in front of him, he actually started a fight with the guy. So I basically live in fear of anybody hitting on me in front of him. He's also very jealous with our friends. I have a really big group of friends, and a lot of them are males. He's outright told our male friends to not touch me or ever even hug me or kiss me when they see me. By the way, a lot of these guys are already married and in relationships. So the fact that my husband does that is just ridiculous. It's obviously humiliating to me. The only person my husband is not jealous of is his own brother. And at first I thought this was a good thing. His brother offered to move in with us while we were renovating our house. My husband and him basically work all day on the house. I get to work from home, so I'm usually in my own office. A few weeks ago, my brother-in-law started coming into my office. First he would just talk to me, and then it turned into flirting. Then he started insinuating how good looking I was, how lucky my husband is. Part 2 is up. My brother-in-law keeps trying to hook up with me. Should I tell my jealous husband? That's when he started coming into my office to flirt with me. He would compliment everything about me. He would tell me that I had a great body, that I had a beautiful face. I know that he could visibly see how uncomfortable it made me, but he kept going. Of course, it never occurred to me to tell my husband because of how violent he gets when he's jealous. And he knew that, which is why he kept pushing it. One day, my husband and him went to a local bar after finishing up work at home. When they came home, my husband was completely wasted. My brother-in-law put my husband in our bed and told me that I should get him some water. I went down to the kitchen to grab my husband a bottle of water, but my brother-in-law followed me into the kitchen, cornered me up against the fridge, and tried to kiss me. By the way, I could smell the alcohol on him, so I knew he was drunk. I pushed him away and told him not to touch me. That's when he started apologizing. He said, I thought you wanted it. As I started walking away, he grabbed my arm and kissed me. But the truth is, part of me liked it. Truthfully, I always found my brother-in-law very attractive. By the way, it's not like I just let him kiss me. I was trying to fight him off. When he let me go, I slapped him and I ran upstairs. Of course, I avoided him after that. A few days later, I was having dinner with my friends when my brother-in-law shows up at the restaurant and sits at a table right across from us. Proceeded to just stare at me the whole time. Finally got up to the bathroom and he followed me. That's when he grabbed me and kissed me again. Part 3 is up.
Story time about how my sister was hooking up with my boyfriend. Little background information, I was 15 and in 10th grade, and I have never had a boyfriend before. Any guy that I was sort of talking to, we never made it out of the talking stage. But fast forward, I met this one guy who we're gonna call Jake, and because of how tragic my love life was, I didn't expect us to get into a relationship, but he ended up asking me to be his girlfriend. So of course I said yes. I was super excited that I had a boyfriend, and then he met my family. And my older sister and I were like super close, so I told her all about him, and she just couldn't wait to meet him. Real quick, I just want to give a big shout out to Lumino for sponsoring today's video. Lumino Whitening Kit is one of the best ways to whiten your teeth without paying hundreds of dollars, especially if you have sensitive teeth. This is the next best thing. Although I have veneers, they only cover the front of my teeth, so my teeth can still be very sensitive to certain chemicals that other brands use in their products. If you guys want to go check out their 7-pack for under $15, the link is in my bio. So whenever he met my sister, she was being super talkative to him, and I thought it was just because she was excited to meet him, like for part 2. Part 2 about how I found out my sister was hooking up with my boyfriend. So like I said, he came over, he met my sister, they got along super well. Fast forward, my parents decided to have a family gathering, and my sister was like begging me to invite my boyfriend, which I didn't plan on inviting him at all because my family is super annoying and would make a big deal about the fact that this is my first boyfriend. She was like, okay, but if you guys are seriously in a relationship, I think that he should meet your family. So I ended up inviting him. So my mom called me to the kitchen to help pass out drinks, which was super annoying because my sister was literally doing fucking nothing. So after I'm done with that, I'm looking for my boyfriend and he's nowhere to be found. So I go upstairs, and as I'm about to walk up the stairs, both of them come down. And when I asked what was wrong, like why they were upstairs together, she was like, oh, I was showing him to the bathroom, which I felt super weird about, but because she was my sister, I let it go because you're supposed to trust your family. Stuff started. Part 3 about how my sister got with my boyfriend. So things started to get really sus because every time that he would come over, they would always find a way to be alone with each other. So fast forward, my sister and I are supposed to go to one of her friends' parties. The whole time though, she kept asking me if I would invite my boyfriend. And no offense, I love my boyfriend, but I need space away from him sometimes. And not to mention, I felt like I was dragging him around like a dog because she was the one who would want me to invite him everywhere. Fast forward, I end up inviting him to the party. My sister gets super drunk, really sick, and my boyfriend offers to take her to the bathroom. And I was like, excuse me, I'm her sister. I can do that. Thank you very much. So after I say that, my sister looks at me and she was like, I would appreciate it if you would just stop being like this because I feel super sick right now. Like, okay, play the victim. Anyway, so I go to check on them in the bathroom. They're not in there. And one of the bedroom doors was open, so when I went in there, I saw them doing the nasty. I asked her how long this had been going on, and she said it was since the first time that they met. And now I'm ignoring my sister until she goes to college.